Gracious God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Happy Easter, my friends. Happy Sunday of the Resurrection. Thank you for being here. As a priest, a lot of people often ask me about beliefs. What do you believe? What does your church believe about this or that? What does the Bible say about this or that? And in our scientific age, they're often expecting that I can explain somehow, magically, about quantifiable, verifiable, measurable things that explain the things we believe in. They want me to explain the way we can describe something hard or brown or big or small. They want to understand exactly how it works, how it moves from one thing to another. And sometimes I can, sometimes I can't, sometimes I don't know the answer. That happens more often than I would like. But one thing that stands out to me is that belief in the way we understand it, what do you believe, what can you prove, right, is slightly different, well, actually, quite dramatically different from the way that the early Christians believed, the way that they believed. Many of the early Christians weren't really thinking about belief the way we do, right? Describe something scientifically, measurable, quantifiable, verifiable. Instead, the early Christians were thinking about things, beliefs, as the things that they set their minds on, the things that they set their hearts on, the things that guided their lives, the things that they hoped for, the things that got them through the hard times and the joyful times. And so they were inspired by, didn't always sort of try to measure up every single thing. If they did, the four Gospels would look a lot more similar to each other than they do. So this idea of belief that they had is important for us to remember on this Sunday of the Resurrection, where many of you might be sitting in the pews thinking to ourselves, this is a beautiful service. Look at that beautiful altar, but I don't believe in the resurrection. I mean, have anybody heard of something coming back to life? Someone? Plants. But human beings, that's another story. It's hard to believe, right? Quantifiably, measurably, right? Verifiably, it's hard to believe. Now, if we think about how the early Christians were thinking about the resurrection, right? About the thing that they set their minds on, the thing that they set their hearts on, the thing that they set their hopes on, that invites us into a different journey of faith this morning. On the first day of the week, the women were running to the tomb. They had just experienced this terrible, terrible week. Terrible week. Because their teacher didn't just die. Their teacher was murdered. He was executed very painfully and very cruelly. I'm speed dialing because this is what we've been doing all week. Just really sitting with what terrible ways human cruelty can do to other human beings, especially to one who threatened the empire, who threatened the stability that people came to know. And so the women had experienced the pain and the struggle of the weak. And now they were devastated by Christ's death, but they wanted to honor him. So they came back to the tomb to prepare his body, to continue the grieving ritual. But lo and behold, they got to the tomb, and it was empty. And so all of a sudden it's this, oh my goodness, what is going on here? When these men, maybe angels, maybe messengers, tell them, he's not here. He is risen, like he told you. And notice that the women believed immediately. They remembered what God had said, what Jesus had said when he was alive. And they went immediately and they went and told their friends. They told the disciples, hey, he is risen. And the disciples, the male disciples, did not believe them. I mean, it's hard to believe, isn't it? What do you mean he came back from the dead? They were maybe thinking they wanted something quantifiable and verifiable and measurable. I want to see the proof. But notice that they didn't just not believe. They found this news to be so outrageous that they outright dismissed the women. The word that in Greek we find here doesn't just mean idle tale, right? Like that sounds kind of childish, like, oh, like all the kids, they make up stuff. It wasn't that. It's a much stronger word. They dismissed what the women said as garbage, drivel, nonsense, crap, right? So they really were just sort of like, you guys are just being, hysterical, or you guys are just making stuff up, or I don't know what's going on with your grief. This isn't true, right? But Peter decides to go and sort of see for himself. So it is very human of us to want proof, right? It is very human of us to want to know the details and the fine details, and we can argue about them and we can talk about them and try to figure them out. I welcome that. It's exciting for me as a priest. And there's a deeper truth in this story about relationships, about believing the stories that we share with one another, about believing the ways we share of ourselves with one another, built on relationship. Because you see, the women didn't believe Jesus was alive because they saw that the tomb was empty. They saw that the tomb was empty. But when the angels or the messengers or the men, when they tell them, remember what he told you, the women remembered. This was their teacher. This was the one that they knew closely and intimately. They knew him well. And they're like, yes, the guy we knew, yes, he told us this, and this is what he would do. We know him. Which was hard for the male disciples. They did not believe. They didn't enter that space of relationship. That was hard. Eventually, they got there. They got there eventually. And the story of Jesus and his resurrection, coming back to life, became a story that human beings could pin their hopes on. That death was not the final word. That betrayal and scorn and fear and political maneuvering and human cruelty, those were not the final words. The story of the resurrection is that in the darkest night, light will eventually shine forth. And that is what we pin our hopes on. Not necessarily because we can measure it and verify it and quantify it and bottle it and sell it, but because it is something that is born inside of us, that drives us towards hope, that drives us to withstand the harshest moments of life. It's not something we believe scientifically. It's something we believe by faith. I place my hope. I place my heart on this. It doesn't always make sense, friends. It doesn't always make sense. And it is powerfully transformative. Last night at the vigil, the choir sang an incredible song, I Believe in the Son. And I was sitting here and I was telling them how amazing they were and how moved I was, when Debbie reminded me this morning the origin of the words. And I was like, no wonder I was so deeply moved. There is power in these words that transcend just how beautiful they are. And I want to tell you about them. The song as they sang said, I believe in the sun, even when it is not shining. I believe in love, even when I don't feel it. I believe in God, even when He is silent. These are statements of hope. These are statements of what we set our sights on. There are several versions of the origins of this story, of this inscription. The earliest one comes from a Swiss newspaper from June 26, 1945. It was published as a special correspondence from an unnamed reporter writing from Cologne in Germany. The original is in the Swiss National Library. The article talks about Catholic resistance during the Nazis' time in Cologne, and it speaks of underground bomb shelters that Catholic communities brought up to protect themselves. Underground passages that also protected Jewish people persecuted by the Nazi government. In one of them, they found this inscription, which translated from German in the newspaper report goes like this: I believe in the sun, though it be dark. I believe in God, though He be silent. I believe in neighborly love, though it be unable to reveal itself. It's a little bit different. It's a little bit different, but here is what's important. I believe in the sun, even though they're stuck underground for months, unable to see it. They're stuck for months, sheltering in the darkness underground. But I set my heart on the beauty of nature that exists above, of life that continues above, even though I cannot experience it. I believe in God, even though He feels silent when I pray that this ends, and it doesn't. But I believe, I set my heart on that truth, that God is there. I believe in neighborly love, in compassion, though in this moment, it's not revealing itself. Though in this moment, what I see is my neighbors attacking me, is my neighbors jailing me, it's my neighbors dehumanizing me. This is the hope that Jewish people in these underground communities wrote. It's what kept them going. It doesn't make sense to believe in God or in the sun or in neighborly love when all evidence is to the contrary. And yet, these individuals place their hopes and hearts and minds on these enduring truths. Just like the women set their minds and hearts and beliefs in the truth that Jesus of Nazareth taught, the way of love, which is a radical expression of absolute solidarity and care for one another, care for the earth, especially care for the marginalized and the oppressed. Jesus of Nazareth taught them about selfless service, about putting down the hierarchies that human beings put for each other. That is what they set their beliefs on. And that was the resurrection that they experienced on that morning. That's the resurrection that they preached to the other disciples, who eventually came to see it too. And then came to share it, and has been shared for centuries to millions of people who have set their hearts and minds on this truth. That what Jesus of Nazareth preached, that what he stood for, could not be contained by death. It came back to life. I believe in the resurrection. I give my heart to the hope that the goodness and love that the world knew in Jesus did not die with him. I give my heart to the promise that nothing in all of creation, not life and not death, not principalities or powers, nothing can separate us from the love of God. And in my darkest night, and in the darkest times of our lives, that is the hope that keeps me going. And I hope it's the hope that keeps you going. Alleluia, Christ is risen.